rice flour, etc. But there's something that's not connecting in these parts of it. And whether it's because there's policy failures to encourage that, whether there's poor connections between technological development in food processing and the industry, or whether there's another set of issues which I haven't analysed the sector very well, but my sense is that it's something about these different parts of the equation not connecting and working in synergy in some way, because the potential is there. And this is one of the challenges for us of thinking about how innovation capacity can really be built, and thinking about policy instruments which go beyond just the investment in food processing research, but actually are about investments in connecting research and business, connecting us with international opportunities, connecting us with companies in Australia or Japan who have technological expertise and we brought to bear on this, thinking about policy reforms, a whole bunch of things that are going to be needed to make this move forward. One of our projects is looking at modifying cassava starch. Now that potentially could transform the raw products market for a whole range of things, which you could tell me about in more detail. But there's obviously something that's stopping the small industry around that, disrupting the bigger commodity market for processed ingredients. Now, whether that's because companies feel more comfortable with imported things, or quality's not right, or there's sort of hidden policy agendas that you can't imagine, not clear. But it's not a technological problem alone.
Thank you.
Well, innovation, there's a lot of room for innovation around the world, and especially in Indonesia, since we've not discovered anything about Indonesia as of yet, anything from in the sea or on the land, either's fine. So, exactly how much impact can innovation have on an economy or whatever, on the world?
It's limitless, you know. Our creativity is limitless. I mean, it's a very difficult question to answer, but all the social and economic progress that we've seen historically has been through innovation, and it will continue to be so. There's an argument about limited growth, and the argument being that we've got to the point where we can no longer produce enough food, or we don't have sustainable sources of energy. Well, we've been at that point in time a number of times before, and we've used innovation to get past that threshold and onto another level. And I think that's probably the situation the world's at the moment. But to do that, we know that the innovation processes that we've done in the past are not going to be enough for the future. And that's why people are thinking really very hard about how science, business, policy can be reconfigured to drive the processes of innovation that we need for the future. If you look historically in the 20th century, take the food processing industry, modes of innovation there were large-scale public sector research, some private sector research, engineering development. Well, that mode of innovation is clearly not going to serve us well into the future. It served us well in the past when a lot of the problems of an engineering nature. When we're now thinking about innovations in both the marketing as well as the policy environment, innovations around consumer demands and preferences, we need to have some other matrix to use these knowledge resources in a more effective way. And this is not an easy question to answer, but it's a question that people are asking globally. The sustainable development goals that every country in the world has signed up to including Australia, are really about thinking how can major societal problems be addressed through innovation, and what are the modalities of innovation that are going to be required to do that. So the end of the world is not going to happen soon. That's what you're worried about.
Thank you. Questions? We still have around 20 minutes. Please.
So, Dr. Andy, my name is Agus Naro. I'm faculty at Israel also. So I have just remembered the other game saying innovate or die. So fail while we are doing innovation or fail in doing innovation also will let us to die. So my question is, in your opinion, Dr. Andy, how to be success in doing innovation? Thank you very much.
Well, that's the topic of my whole talk, in a sense. But if we're going to have success in innovation, we need to somehow get the right sort of policies in place that are going to direct public investments into the right things, and we need to have a much better interface between science and entrepreneurship, so that we continue to get these streams of innovation going forward into the future. But I mean, innovation or die is true for both business and it's true for society as a whole. If you're a taxi company at the moment, you're going to die because Uber is going to wipe taxis off the face of the earth in the
Grab car. In English, it's grab car.
Grab car, is it? It will transform taxi services. So unless you're a company and you can think of the next innovation that's going to be better than that, you will die. And population growth projections for 2050. So we're going to have a doubling or a tripling of population. Well, if we don't drive innovation in food production in the next 10 to 15 years, that's really going to start to hit. If we don't find sustainable sources of energy, that's going to start to hit. If we don't think about more effective water management and use, these things are going to hit. I'm a great optimist that we can reconfigure this process of innovation, and that we can understand how to do it better and build our ability to do that. But I think that really is the essence of my talk. And what I would say is that an innovation scientist, I study innovation. There's huge scope for looking and studying and learning from both historical patterns of innovation and studying the innovation processes that we're involved in at the moment, and trying to understand how we can make them more effective.
Thank you. Any more questions?
When you innovate, you usually start out from ideas, and my question is, how do you differentiate the fine line between cheating from others and creativity and innovation? Because there's very little things that novel right now, that are novel, that are entirely new.
Well, I think one of the key features of innovation is that it's about imitation. You might call that cheating. But a better way of saying that is it's about creative imitation. So, Apple comes along with a smartphone, and Samsung actually copies it, comes along with a slightly better one. Uber's come along and disrupted the whole taxi market, or somebody else will imitate that and come along with the next one. So I think that the process of imitation is part and parcel of the innovation process. It's about reworking existing ideas and trying to apply them.
Okay, next.
from the biomedicine major, and I want to ask about the independent systems. How do you measure the success rate of independent system?
Brilliant question. That is a totally brilliant question. And I'll tell you why it's a brilliant question. Because we don't know how to do it. But I'll answer it in a more constructive way. I'll tell you a little bit about the history of innovation systems thinking, where it came from. The idea came from observations in the 1980s about the disconnect between research investments and economic performance. And it was the study of the Japanese economy which really started to get people to think about innovation systems. So economists use metrics about research investment as a percentage of GDP, and they set targets for all countries that said if you invest, the figure is 5% of GDP in research, you'll have a healthy economy. Well, what we started to see in the 1980s, that some of the countries that were investing the same amount in R&D were having these huge leaps in economic growth that were out of sync with historical trends. So, two things came out of that. One, people started to question whether research investment and patents was a useful way of measuring innovative performance. And then they started to talk about trying to understand innovative performance in terms of these systems ideas. So patents of partnership, nature of policy, relationship between public and private sectors. Now when you get into that kind of woolly systems area, it becomes very, very difficult to put a number on it. And it becomes very difficult to set benchmarks about the performance and capacity of the system. Now there's a whole heap of stuff being done by OECD